Today you see how to sew a robe. It's super simple construction. It would be an amazing idea for a gift that you can sew for someone else, easy to fit. I've chosen silk for mine and I don't regret my choice. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing. I'm coming to you from my house in Brazil. I'm inside, it's pouring out there. I hope you can't hear it because for me it sounds really loud. It's rainy season, going into summer. That's how it is over here. It doesn't rain all year. It just rains in the summer. A lot of my choices for fabric and styles of clothing that I make have got to do with the place where I live in, the weather, and what's going to suit me best. You see why I've chosen a certain type of fabric for my robe and not another type of fabric for my robe. So what I'm talking about is a Roseto robe from Each Stitch. It's a brand new pattern released just a couple of hours ago. This robe has been designed to be super easy fitting, and it could work for your husband, your brother, your son. It can work for yourself, anyone really. It doesn't really have bust shaping, that sort of thing. It's not a woman's pattern as such. It's a nice loose style. It's got a drop shoulder style. The sleeve cap you'll see is almost flat. It's not a rectangle, long sleeve. And then going down the front, it'll be finished with a neckband made out of the same fabric. You have patch pockets on the hips. You have a sash, belt loops on the side, and you can choose between a length that's above the knee and one that's sort of at the ankles. I know in the past I've used long robes when I lived in really cold climate, and yeah, that was amazing to have your shower and just put on your warm robe. That was amazing. But that's not my reality right now, so I've chosen the knee length version this time. Sewing construction is the same, it's just that one piece is longer than the other. Because the Roseto robe is a brand new pattern at Each Stitch, it'll be 20% off for the first week, and this sale runs through next Thursday, the 14th of November. So if you want to grab it for a little bit less, it's always great to get it when the pattern is released. I'll leave you my affiliate link in the top of the comment section pinned. Very easy to scroll and find. If you click on the link, it'll take you directly there. If you end up purchasing the pattern, because you clicked on my link, I will receive a small commission back from the designer. And it's one of the ways I make an income creating sewing videos here on YouTube that you can watch without paying anything. So if you do like my work, if it does help you and you'd like to support what I do, using my link doesn't cost you anything extra. So if you use it, I'm always super grateful. Now you can use a lot of different types of fabrics to make your robe. Knits and wovens are going to work. Light, medium, heavyweight, they're just going to fit a little bit different and feel a little bit different. Now I'll talk about drapey, lighter fabrics if you want to make yourself a summer robe like I've made myself. You know, you could use 100% silk, which is what I've chosen in this opportunity. I always knew that this silk fabric was special. I've had it for a few years. My husband actually purchased this when he went to Austria a couple of years ago. He got me a few silk pieces. Really beautiful color. He just knows what I like. And he knows I'm into the red burgundy tones. So that's what I had, 100% silk satin, beautiful. Another fabric you could use that would look amazing as well is rayon satin. I also have a few cuts of this type of fabric. It is 100% rayon, but it's weaved in a way that has that sheen and that satin feel. No polyester in there. I think that's another great alternative for that beautiful luxe look while being a little bit cheaper than the 100% silk. Another one you could use is just the poly satin. I have used this type of fabric in the past, but I've sort of moved away from that type of fabric because it can get a little bit warm to wear. You can use 100% rayon if you want to, just for a really light layer. You don't need the sheen, but you can make it in a beautiful print. You could make the sleeve a little shorter. It's not included in the pattern, but it would be a very easy adjustment to make if you wanted. And then you have all the winter types of fabrics. Now, believe me, I did look for some online. I tried to figure out if I could find a nice fabric so I can make it as a gift for my dad or my mom, but I wasn't really able to find something nice for cool climates. You could use fleece, you could use a fleece back sweatshirting, a fleece back French terry, you know, those waffle knits. You can find the waffle textures in knit and wovens. Actually, this is the fabric that Kenneth used, her waffle material, beautiful. I can't find that. I tried, believe me, I tried looking for that. I couldn't find it to purchase. But it's a really classic type of robe material. Typical white hotel robes are made out of that. You could use some type of toweling material if you could find that. And then there's other things like flannel. If you could find a really nice quality wool flannel, it would be an amazing robe material as well. You don't need any interfacing or any other notions for this. you know, the way that the belt loops are made and the sash is made is just layers of the fabric folded onto itself, so you don't need to stabilize any of the pieces right here. So that makes it easy. Now the sizing is very different to other each to stitch patterns here because it's more relaxed, easy fit. We have extra small to XXL, but don't be fooled by the XXL because you still go up to a 60.5-inch hip here with the largest size. And there's plenty more ease right there as well. So if your hips are like 62, 63 inches, it would still be okay fit to make the XXL. And as I mentioned, this could be for anyone. It doesn't just have to be for women. It can also be for men. Now I plotted my measurements down there and I turn out to be a size medium in this type of sizing. And the ease is so generous. I mean, the ease around the bust and the waist is about 14 inches. Just take that in. It's a lot. And the hips, 10 inches. So there's a nice amount of space for you to be comfortable. There's nothing that's going to be constricting and hard to fit and things like that. And that's why I say this could be a really, really good present for you to sew for someone. Most of the time, if you want to sew for someone, it's really hard, especially if you can't fit them. But I think for this one, it would be very, very hard for you to make a robe that's not going to fit the person and that they're going to be unhappy with. Pretty easy to fit. I think it's a perfect gift that you could plan for someone special. And I'm saying for someone special because sewing takes a lot of your time and your resources. You know, the only times I sew for other people are for my close family members. I don't sew for anyone else. I wouldn't think of sewing things just for, you know, anyone. It has to be super special for me. And that's just the way I think about it. Now about personal fitting and sizing, I already mentioned that I chose a size medium. You know, I could have made a size medium for my husband as well. He's a similar height and build to me, so that size would have fit him as well. I chose the above the knee length. I measured the pieces and figured out, yeah, it's a little short, but I decided to just keep it as is because mine's a summer robe. I wanted mine a little shorter. So just remember, length is whatever you want it to be. You could make yours longer. You could go in between both the lengths that you have on the pattern piece. Now for sewing, I have filmed the whole thing for you. You see, I did a few extra things just because of my fabric choice. If I would have sewn this in a waffle knit or a fleece or a flannel, it would have been so easy. It's so easy to sew. But because I chose silk, it turned out to be a project that took me several days to make, which is typical what I say for when I'm sewing a lined blazer or a dress with many intricate details. It takes me a few days. That was my experience for this robe, but just because I chose silk. It's still worth it. I'm very happy to have it. All the hours it took, well worth my time. Let's see how it came together. These are the larger pattern pieces of the robe. This is the back, it's cut on the fold. It has a sort of drop shoulder style right there. And the front, of course, is not on the fold. It's got a slight curve in the center front. What you can see here is my pattern piece. It's a patch pocket. The top of the pocket is interfaced to make it more stable. There are lines on the pattern that tell you where to place it because I can't really mark my silk well with a friction pen. I did some thread marks there so I can place it on later. Another thing I've done to make my life easier is do some guide stitches for the hem later. So those are already done. It's going to help me press and be accurate with that when the time comes. And let me show you the smaller pieces. Here's the sleeve. You can see that the sleeve on the top is quite flat. There is a rounded section there and it matches the drop shoulder style of the armhole. So it's not the typical sleeve shape, very easy to put in. At the bottom it gets straighter and I also have some guide stitches to help me hem later. These are the two belt loops. This is the band. It's folded a little bit so it fits on the table. They're quite long pieces. There is going to be a center back seam. And that on top is a sash. Also will have a center back seam. The pieces are super long. It would be very, very hard to just cut one continuous piece. I'm using a Microtex needle 80 for this project. This is one that's really good for silk and really lightweight fabrics like this. First step are the shoulder seams. I've got them both aligned here, the two front pieces with the back. Pretty long shoulder seams. That's because of the drop style of the garment. All the seam allowance here are 1/2 inch. I rarely sew sleeves on the flat, but this is an exception. This is a very loose design. This seam underneath the arm is going to be way below where your arm is, so it's not going to bother me to have that little bit of a bulk there. And I think it would be just more complicated to sew this on the round, being that this is almost a straight sleeve. So here we go. They are going in on the flat. These are the shoulder seams right there. Neckline, front. That's the back on the fold, and both the sleeves have been pinned on. And now another seam at 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've sewn and serged the sleeves. There is the seam right there. I've pressed the seam towards the sleeve there. And now I've aligned the sleeves together. So now we sew the sleeve, going through all of that and going down the side seam, and we have the main construction. After that, we sew on the band. For this robe, because the edges are fraying so much with this silk, I've opted to serge first and then sew my seam. I think that's easier. I can get the fraying out of the way quickly. It's easy to manage at the serger. I can be careful to trim all this fraying away without cutting away actual seam allowance. I don't always do it like this. It just depends. Most of the time I sew first and then serge, but in this case it's the serging and then the sewing. After sewing the side seams and the sleeves, I'm gonna just do the hems just because they're right here. Now I had done some guide stitches at the beginning. The original pattern has you fold up and serge the edge, and I would do that if I was working with another type of fabric. But for silk, I want 2 folds. I think it'll be neater, it'll prevent the fraying. So I've done a fold at 1/4 inch and then the hem allowance you're supposed to do with the pattern. So you can see my guide stitch. With the silk, I'm also avoiding the iron as much as I can. I folded up this by hand and hand basted it instead of pressing it at the iron. And then I can do this next fold. And I'm also going to hand baste it. And then I'm going to sew, and then I'm just going to press once, just to avoid extra iron onto the silk. I always knew the hem was going to take longer. I think it's an area that could turn out super wonky with this type of slippery fabric. So I'm taking all the precautions and all the hand basting necessary to make it look neat. Here's the main construction done, including the hems. I don't have to worry about that. They turned out super neat, gave them a nice soft press, low heat. And now we have this band, and it's similar to how you sew bands on cardigans, only in this case it's 1-to-1. You're not stretching the band to fit anywhere. So I have gone ahead and sewn the center back seam there. It's all in there, tucked inside. I've pressed it lengthwise, wrong sides together, so the seam is hiding in there. And I'm going to match that to the center back of the neckline over here, and then just keep pinning all the way down. You have marks that are going to match the shoulder seams. There's another mark that's going to be around this curve coming down the front right there, all the way down to the bottom. Now in the instructions it says to finish the bottom first. All you will do at the bottom is extend this, fold it right sides together here, and then the bottom will be finished. But I want to confirm that the length is correct. So when I confirm that I get to the bottom and it's the correct length over here, I should have 1/2 inch seam allowance protruding here in the raw section right there, like that. Then I'm going to go ahead and sew that at the end. So I'm going to take my time, pin, and then once I've confirmed the length, then I'm going to sew this. Okay, here's the bottom of the band. I already sewed that and flipped it. So when you sew it afterwards, both edges are going to be nice and clean. I have opted to hand baste this. It took me so long to pin it to keep all the raw edges together. As you can imagine, this fabric is just the hardest one to work with. My own choice though, so I hand basted this like I've been doing with all the main seams. You know, I'm going to serge it first. I want to get rid of all this fraying that's happening here. And after serging it, I'll sew it. Once it's sewn, the seam allowance is going to go towards the robe. The last steps are the belt loops over here, sewing the sash and sewing on the pocket. Top stitching this down is optional. I've decided to do it, and I'm using this presser foot that will help me edge stitch really neatly. It'll help keep the seam flat and less bulky. The seam allowance is pressed towards the robe, so away from the band. Here is my robe. I love the color, I love the sheen. It's a silk satin 100%. So beautiful. I was careful to hand wash the fabric first, lay it flat on a table. I will leave you a video link below where I show you how I treat my silk fabric, because you don't just throw it in the wash like any other regular fabric. Unless you want it to tear to shreds, you need to hand wash it, and there's a little bit of a process there. You also need special detergent. So I'll leave that content for you down below if you want to know more about silk. In any case, I did everything I had to do, and here it is. It's this beautiful dark red burgundy color, gorgeous. You see, I did my hems by doing a little fold on the inside here. Even though the instructions just said serge and fold up, you know, that would be appropriate for all the other types of fabrics, but for this one I wanted that extra fold in there. I really thought about doing French seams before starting to sew, and I thought, nah, I'm not gonna do them. I'm really picky about when I do French seams or not, and I used to do more of them in the past, but knowing that I have pretty much any color serge thread that I would want, and knowing that that would be a really nice neat result, I just went with that option. And if I'm saying this robe took days to make, it would have taken even longer if I would have done the French seams. So I just have regular serged seams in there, and I think it's totally appropriate and acceptable. So that's what I did about that. You know, I rarely sew sleeves on the flat. If you've been watching my content, I always sew things on the round. But I think for a style like this, it's perfectly appropriate to sew it on the flat. This is not tight. This is way below here. The reason I sew it on the round is for comfort right there and for mobility. But that's not what you need with a sleeve like that. So I sewed it as per the instructions. I didn't show you sewing my belt loops in the end, because that's boring. When I had my belt loop done, I put on my robe and determined where I wanted that belt loop to be, because, you know, that's going to be personal for everyone. And the sash and the belt loop are made in the exact same way. What you do is take it, fold it, and then fold it again. So you end up with 4 layers there for your loop and your sash. It's not the type where you just fold it, sew it, and flip it, which would just give you 2 layers of fabric. In this case, you get 4 layers of fabric. That means that you don't need any interfacing. And my pockets, these took ages to sew on. I also didn't film these, but you saw that I marked where they needed to be with thread, because that's something that lasts. And when I sewed these pockets on, same. I hand basted a lot. And yeah, it took me ages to sew on. But yeah, it was all worth it. I love how it turned out. I think it's amazing. And I'm going to show you this on with the only camisole that's a little bit fancy that I have. It was gifted to me by my mom a couple of years ago. And yeah, it's nothing terrible. I'm not showing anything. But yeah, I did this like around 5:30 a.m. at dawn, just when the sun was coming out, to model out there and to really lower the chance of my neighbors seeing me out there with my robe. I'm sure no one saw me. Let's see. This is my Roseto robe from Itch to Stitch. This is easy to fit. I've done the above the knee length. There is a longer length. I've got my sash tied at the waist. Very easy construction here, drop shoulder style, nice loose sleeves, easy fit. There are some patch pockets there sewn on the sides. Due to the nature of my fabric, they look a little droopy, but what can you expect? It is lightweight, 100% silk. The belt loops were easy to sew. I've sewn a size medium, still a super generous, comfy fit, and I'm very happy with my result in silk. Up closer you can see my neckband. It's been edge stitched to keep it flat. Very easy technique. And the feet of the shoulders, as you can see, nice, relaxed, as a robe should be. There's nothing here that should feel tight or uncomfortable. I have to be honest, it took a long time to sew. Even though the sewing construction is pretty straightforward, it was just the nature of the fabric. Maybe it might look a little short to you, but I wanted it this short. This is the original length for this option. You can always make it longer or sew the longer version. Now I've gone the unconventional path of choosing 100% silk for mine. I think a lot of people would prefer cozier, warmer fabrics, but I live in Brazil and I'm in tropical heat right now. This is my dream. I'd always wanted a silk robe like this, and I had just the perfect color fabric for it. Love it. This is how it looks untied. I've got super beautiful camisole underneath, and this one was gifted to me by my mom a few years ago, one of the few pieces I have like that, and I can't wait to wear this around the house. I feel absolutely amazing. This is just handmade luxury and it's the best thing. I'm so glad I was able to sew it, and maybe you should give silk a go too if you wanted a piece like this. I'm super happy with mine. I know mine's a little different. When I was in the testing group, I just kept seeing everyone's cozy versions and I just couldn't relate to that right now. I can't. I just could not. I couldn't find fabric like that either. They just don't sell that fabric here for some reason. So I stuck with what I have, what my dream was. I'd always wanted a silk robe like this, and now I have it. It's amazing and I'm gonna treasure it. All the time it took was totally worth it, and I'm very happy. Have a look at the Roseto robe on sale through Thursday the 14th of November, 20% off. Get it for yourself, get it for your whole family. You can make it for everyone and make it as gifts. Super easy sew if you don't use silk. But if you want a challenge, I suggest you do it because it's so worth it. I love it so much and I don't regret all the time it took. As always, I enjoy the whole process of sewing. All projects are different and not all of them have to take a day or 3 days. Some can take an hour. There's a whole mix of projects you can sort of alternate between in your sewing time, and it just makes it fun and I love it. I love what I do if you can't tell. That's all from me. Have an amazing weekend and I'll see you back on this channel next week. Bye.